I realized, I don't know if I've ever said this on any podcast, but that I was telling my husband at one point that some of the things I was going through now in my 40s to try to get this book published, I actually went through Hurt, Healing, and Hope, the book, the actual physical book, and I found the answers that she wrote to herself way back when. And I found additional healing in something that I left for myself 20 years ago. And that just, I don't even know how. It was such a realization. It was such a strange moment in time that, I just, oh my gosh, I left this for me to see so many years later, to then take it to this next level of publishing it. Because by this point, I said, I want to publish this to help somebody. If somebody can read one or two words that I wrote, then I would have done my job as a human being, and I would have supported somebody's healing. And that's where it was going to end there. I mean, it literally was going to end. And then it got to the point that it couldn't end there because I didn't know how to find those people. So I need to get this word out to everybody because I want to help that one person. And I want to perhaps be the reason that one person says, maybe I can heal too. Look, she did it, because there's people that did this before me and they inspired me. And so I kind of got to that point, and I don't know. And here I am now. And my husband said before I published, he said, "You never talk about this, and now you're publishing a book about it." And I said, "Yeah, I guess I am." He goes, "Well, how do you feel about that?" I said, "I don't know. I wonder sometimes why I'm doing it too, but then somebody crosses through my path or something happens and it reminds me of, this is why you're doing it." And it's not me. It's coming from something so much bigger than myself. And I keep moving forward because I want to support healing to anyone that might be able to heal.
Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Filled with stories of inspiration, Loving Our Life's Work podcast shares examples of courage, perseverance, and triumph. Our guests are examples of people who are actively living their life's purpose, and they've come to share the vision of their life's work with us today so that we can learn to give ourselves permission to live ours. If you feel after watching this podcast that you've gained some inspiration or we've added some value to your life, of course, please feel free to subscribe and follow us for more content. Comment, hit the thumbs up, and share it with someone you know who would also benefit from hearing this amazing story. Loving Our Life's Work podcast is part of the vision of the Life's Work Positivity brand. Our free public broadcast interviews are available on YouTube and Spotify and out at the first of every month. I'm Adam Devaney, a clinical social worker and founder and CEO of the Life's Work Positivity brand. Today, we have the privilege of having Melissa Lombardo with us. She is a survivor, a thriver, and a change maker. She is a Connecticut State Certified Sexual Assault Crisis Advocate, an author of Hurt, Healing, and Hope, Thriving Beyond Rape and Sexual Assault. And this is not only a powerful book and journal, but it's also a performance piece that comes from her own experiences as a college student in her 20s. Her premier work is a collection of interwoven monologues that can be read, vocalized, and personalized. And of course, a portion of all book sales benefit area rape crisis centers, which I think is pretty amazing. Clearly, this is only one small snapshot of her overall work. Melissa is a person who has clearly turned trauma into triumph, and she's here to share her life's work with us today. Welcome, Melissa, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. You're giving me goosebumps just now when you were saying that last part. I said, who is he talking about turning drama? And then I said, oh my gosh, that's me. So
Oh,
thank
that
you
is
very
totally
much.
you.
Sorry, oh my goodness. It's been a long journey, and the journey continues. And I'm just very honored that I'm able to continue doing the things that I know I'm supposed to be doing in this world.
That is fantastic. And that is what this podcast is all about. And I have a feeling today we're going to speak the quiet parts out loud, and we're going to break some taboos in our conversation. And I'm super excited about that because that's always been a part of my life and a part of my journey as well. So really fantastic. Can you tell me a little bit about the background of how your journey started?
I would I'd like to go actually back to when I was really little, and it'll make
Fantastic.
sense. I think of, I'm a full circle type of thinker, and I think that, kind of, something that might have happened to me way back when in reflection, I realize how that might have impacted me. And something that just came to my mind when you said that, and thinking about my travels afterwards is I remember being in the store, grocery store with my mother, and she's probably listening to this now. I was in the grocery store and there was a man, and he was larger. You could say, he was overweight, and I was little. And I said to my mother, that man, he's fat, I said. And she looked at me and she said, well, Melissa, that man, I'm sure, is a really nice man. And that doesn't matter what he looks like. It's how he is as a person. And I will never forget that lesson. And I think that that lesson in and of itself has stuck with me my whole life and has brought me to the point of, being able to see myself in others, and to be able to work with others who, inside whatever somebody's going through, there's a person there, there's a human. And I think what we always strive for is connection. And I've seen that time and time again. And it doesn't matter what somebody looks like or what they've been through. It's that human connection that I think we search for. And I've searched for that, through my whole life. And I think that in a sense, I was sexually assaulted when I was in my 20s, and having been able to travel, which in a sense, and you might want to get into that later, but in a sense, traveling for me was blocking it and disassociating, but at the same time, it was me wanting to learn about the other, wanting to learn about what else was out there, who were these people, in the world. And then it took me all of that to then come back to the United States and heal for real, and find that passion and do what I'm doing now, even though I've had these moments where I'd look up into the sky, the universe, and say, why me? And then something would happen and I would say, oh, yeah, okay, I know why it's me, and kind of coming into that. So I think it started, and I think those building blocks started to get formed at a really young age that would set me up to kind of do these things that I'm doing now, if that makes sense.
It does. And when you were younger then, did you have anybody in your life who was an inspiration to you?
I don't remember who the teacher was when I was in school, but when I was younger, we had a project in school and we had to write a book. And I knew at that point in time that I wanted to write a book. Nobody, um, much less myself, would have imagined what I would write about many years later. But that teacher, and my, mother, who instilled the love of reading, eventually got me to the point where I was able to reflect on these negative, traumatizing experiences. I don't remember which teacher it was, but that teacher was fabulous. How she was, she inspired me to write this book for that school project. And it was a book about bunnies and a guy who found these bunnies, and it was with my fingerprints. And then later on I wrote another one about dogs. Those were the things, that I liked. And that's who's coming to my mind. I think some of the teachers I had were key teachers that just I always remember loving learning. So I'm thinking that particular teachers that I had, in my childhood were really helpful for that. There were some really great, I do know that I had some really great teachers when I was in high school as well, and college professors. And I had a mentor in college, and Ben Tyson, and he was at the Center for Social Research, and I worked there when I was in college. And he was always encouraging to me to be curious with the world. And I had an opportunity to join AmeriCorps when I finished college, and I was thinking about going to Texas. And he goes, "Why are you going to Texas?" I said, "Well, I have a friend there, and I went to visit when I was in college, and I liked Texas." "Well, how about you go to New Mexico?" And I said, "I don't know anyone from New Mexico." "Well, that's why you should go." And he told me about his experience when he was younger. I said, "Okay, I'll go to New Mexico." And that's how I eventually got to Nicaragua, where I spent 17 years of my life, because I had an opportunity at that time to go to Costa Rica to work, or Nicaragua. And I said, oh, I'm going to channel my inner Ben Tyson. Where am I going to go? Costa Rica. I know people from there. I've heard about it. I read about it. Nicaragua. Don't really know anything about it. That's where I was going to go. So 6-month internship turns into almost 17 years of my life at that point. Thank you to Ben Tyson, and we're actually still in touch today. You know, we've had lunch recently. It's a really nice that I can look back on those experiences. So he was actually very critical in some of those decisions I took, you know, later on in life.
Shout out to Ben Tyson. Yeah. If anyone watches the first episode of Loving Our Life's Work podcast, it's with a man named Bill Winkler, who was absolutely positively influential in my life. He was the first person I ever worked for that I was like, yeah, that's a leader. That's not a boss. This is the first
Mm-hmm.
person I would have never let down. And I outline in that conversation with him a conversation that he had with me that ultimately totally changed my life. It was literally just a conversation at the restaurant over lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't even be where I am today, and you and I would not be talking if that small conversation, small but meaningful conversation, hadn't even happened. It is
Nice.
amazing how people influence us, and they'll take our path in life, what we thought was so clear, and just go, eh.
Right.
And then,
Mm-hmm.
uh, so your experiences abroad helped shape the perspective that you had when you came back to the United States, right?
Yes. So while I was in college, I did have the opportunity to take part in some study abroad programs. And after that, I decided I wanted to have my own actually research project. I'll go back to Ben Tyson for a minute. So I ended up going to New Mexico. I joined AmeriCorps and I worked with the homeless and near homeless in New Mexico. I was in Albuquerque. It was a great experience for me. I learned a lot. I made lots of connections. After that, I decided I wanted to go to another country and try to replicate this study about, you know, homeless and near homelessness somewhere else. So I ended up going to Spain and I worked at a soup kitchen in a shelter while I was there before I decided to go to graduate school. I chose to go to the School of International Training, which used to be a Peace Corps training camp, and that school encouraged people to go abroad. And that was where I made the decision of Costa Rica or Nicaragua. So I ended up going to Nicaragua and through Costa Rica, actually. And that experience, yeah, it changed the course of my life. The conversation with Ben Tyson, you know, getting me to go to these places that I might not think to go to. Then deciding to go to graduate school because I wanted a hard science. I got a master's of science in management, and I had studied sociology, science, and sometimes people said to me, well, what can you do with that? And so I wanted to do something, you know, else with that as well to be able to incorporate that. So I go to Nicaragua for a 6-month internship, and something felt like home. And some of my healing from my sexual assault in my 20s started to take place there. And the 6-month internship turned into 6 more months, 1 more month, 1 more month, 1 more month. At this point, I knew this was where I needed to be. I decided, because I thought of my godmother, and she would say to me, okay, I just want to make sure you're going for you. So I thought to myself, if I'm going to stay here, I'm not doing justice to myself if I don't have a degree. I came all this way to not finish my degree. I'm staying after my internship. So I decided I'm going to leave and then I'm going to come back, but I'm going to finish my, you know, capstone, my thesis. And within that month, I met he who would later become my husband. And I did still go back to the United States. I presented my thesis and then I found a job, got myself, you know, back to Nicaragua, you know, for the next 15 years. And what struck me as, you know, the beginning of what I think was second phase of healing, or third phase, because healing's not linear. So I kind of went back and forth, is I was in my house in front of the business that I worked at, and people wear skirts, people wear dresses, and the sexual assault kind of pushed me into the I don't dress up anymore mode. I don't look nice. I didn't take care of myself in the same way. I didn't want to wear anything that was remotely revealing, like a skirt. That's, how my brain worked at the time. And I bought a skirt in the market. It was, knee length skirt. And I looked at it in my closet for a long time, and I tried it on in the house, didn't go out, couldn't go out. And then finally one day I put the skirt on and I decided that I'm walking out of the house. I got half the block down. I turned around, came back, went, put my pants on that I, normally used to wearing. But that was something that I remember that started happening there, that I was able to take that step, or maybe in that case, it was about 25 steps, into my healing, and I recognize that something just happened. I'm still processing, I still started, I was processing it at that time. So I think that was some of the big things that happened, in Nicaragua, healing wise, from trauma, was being able to, start to see what was happening, and kind of start thinking consciously about it of, what's going on, am I safe? Am I not safe? Things like that.
I like how you said healing is not linear. It's hardly a truer statement than that. And it's a series of moments and insight and meaning that happen, much like finding your purpose in life.
Mm-hmm.
And those moments help define really the course of our life and who we become. And each one happens like a spike as opposed to a gradual thing like this. It's more like there is a spike. There's a spike, right? And then you doubt yourself, right? And then you go for a while and then you get another spike. Healing is definitely not linear. I love the way you put that.
No, and that's actually true because, all right, so I'll say that, I was in college. I was in my 20s. I am now well past my 20s, and I'm in my early 40s. And when I came back from Nicaragua to the United States, I came back with my family, and I remember a distinct moment just about 4 years ago that we were taking a bus to, visit New Hampshire. We were going to take a bus trip for the day. It was a local town trip. And I fell asleep in the bus. I woke up and I looked at this commuter parking lot that I recognized from that time period, very close to, where what happened to me happened. And I started kind of shaking, and I had to make sure, I need to breathe. Okay, hold on, not there, Melissa. This is different time, things like that. And that's when I think I started realizing that I need to heal for real this time, and it was during those moments, of being back, looking at, my country and my surroundings and my people and my state, my family with these new eyes. Because in the time that I was away, I didn't come back to the United States that often. But now here I am full time, and it's bringing up all these thoughts, memories, triggers that I thought that I had dealt with, 20 years ago. But I hadn't. And it happened a few more times as well. And my brain starts thinking about these past memories that, I didn't think I had, or, just things of, happened before. And at that point, I decided I was going to join a writer's group, and I was going to start working on, this manuscript. And, I decided that I really wanted to become a sexual assault crisis advocate. I tried to apply 3 times, and it took me until that third time to actually go through with it because just applying was difficult. I started to work on my own healing, not thinking that this was still not thinking that this was going to be what was going to be my passion. And because I knew at that point in time that, I need to work on me. I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to, have these, continuing to have these triggers, and I decided through the writing group that I was going to publish this book, in performance piece. And that became a way for me to take control of this narrative that was taken away from me. So I wanted to, make my own publishing imprint, which is Write, Heal, Thrive, to publish my own books. I didn't want anyone to tell me, oh, you can't have that as a cover, or you have to take out that. I wanted it to be me, not because I'm trying to control everything, but because this is I'm putting me out there. Like what you see in my book, Hurt, Healing, and Hope, is that's Melissa. That's her journal entries. And that is everything that she's had. That's really the culmination of her saying to her 20-year-old self, I'm honoring you by publishing your story from when I was in my 20s going through all that hurt, healing, and hope. So I wanted to take control over everything that was or is hurt, healing, and hope, to be able to say, okay, now you and I, now we're together on the same page. I got, sorry, it's gonna, excuse me, it was mentoring my younger self in a sense is what I realized that I was doing. And so, excuse me for being emotional. And that's what I
There's no
did.
shame in being emotional.
And that's what I did. And I realized, I don't know if I've ever said this on any podcast, but that I was telling my husband at one point that some of the things I was going through now in my 40s to try to get this book published, I actually went through Hurt, Healing, and Hope, the book, the actual physical book, and I found the answers that she wrote to herself way back when. And I found additional healing in something that I left for myself 20 years ago. And that just, I don't even know how. It was such a realization. It was such a strange moment in time that, I just, oh my gosh, I left this for me to see so many years later, to then take it to this next level of publishing it. Because by this point I said, I want to publish this to help somebody. If somebody can read a one or two words that I wrote, then I would have done my job as a human being, and I would have supported somebody's healing. And that's where it was going to end there. I mean, it literally was going to end. And then it got to the point that it couldn't end there because I didn't know how to find those people. So I need to get this word out to everybody because I want to help that one person. And I want to perhaps be the reason that one person says, maybe I can heal too. Look, she did it, because there's people that did this before me and they inspired me. And so I kind of got to that point, and I don't know. And here I am now. And my husband said before I published, he said, you never talk about this. And now you're publishing a book about it. And I said, yeah, I guess I am. He goes, well, how do you feel about that? I said, I don't know. I wonder sometimes why I'm doing it too. But then somebody crosses through my path or something happens and it reminds me of this is why you're doing it. And it's not me. It's coming from something so much bigger than myself. And I keep moving forward because I want to support healing to anyone that might be able to heal.
Thank you for sharing that. I was very passionate and
Sorry.
wonderful. That's fantastic. Take a moment.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Sometimes I don't even recognize my own voice. So that was a lot.
That was incredible. And I noticed a theme in that. And
Hmm.
as I talk to more and more people about this subject, and as I continue to live my purpose, my life's work, there's a theme in it that I see, and that is when people actually touch healing, right? And it might be the third level of healing or the 10th level of healing. It's different for everyone. But when they hit that, they say to themselves, I have to go out into the world and I have to amplify my healing, not for me, but so that I can amplify this so that I can help others to do this same type of healing. That is a common theme in people finding their life's calling, if you will, that purpose, that drive, that, okay, nobody can shut me up about this now, because you take that healing that you did, and it's such a beautiful thing. And then you want to take that and you just want to amplify it out so that it can help other people. This is a universal pattern that I see.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm inspired by others. I start to, now that I start talking about it, and the more I started talking about it, I've met amazing people that have not gone through the same thing I did, but they've also gone through something that they've, healed, and now they're thriving from. And I mean, there are so many, and you know it more than I do, probably. There are so many incredible people in this world that are are doing those things. And it's just, for me, it's, I listen and I'm like, oh my goodness, wow, you've inspired me. The people that I just random people that I might meet, and you start a conversation and somehow they end up telling me something, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and like I just connected with that person without even them knowing about me, and it just, we sometimes have, have this heart connection, wherever it comes from. Maybe it's that like attracts like, you put this out into the world and you just receive that, as well. So, and I've just met some really fascinating, inspirational individuals.
It's a resonant vibration.
Hmm.
It is a magnetic quality in our lives. Right? You talked about several people with me. You talked about the girl in the school program. You talked about the random people that share their stories, like you just said. A person who attended your book launch.
Hmm.
Would you like to share some of those stories with our listeners?
Yes. So when I one story that is somebody I worked with, and I kind of, I don't know if you get this with other people, or if there's any studies that can confirm what I'll say, but sometimes I feel like we might know our purpose, or we might feel that we know what it is, and we just can't put the words to it, or it's kind of scary to us. So that happened to me. And as it got closer to publishing, I kind of, I mean, I knew, and I still know, and I still kind of want to deny it in some senses, because it's scary that I'm going to put this out into the world, and I don't want to, harm anyone, because it's first to, even for doctors and naturopaths and things, it's, you do no harm, and I don't want to harm anyone with anything I say or don't say, or anything like that. And at one point I was saying something similar to this person at my job, and I said, I don't know why I'm doing this. It's so hard. I'm agonizing. I actually had triggers of things that I didn't even remember about the sexual assault happening in the weeks leading up to publication. Like every other day, I'm like, I'm not publishing. Can't do it. This is too much. And I had this trigger um, of something that really affected me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. I mean, I did know that, but I didn't know that, it was in some other part of my brain. And and it was another moment where I said, I can't do this. At any rate, the person at my job, she says, Melissa, this is bigger than you. You're God's instrument. And you can believe whatever you want to believe, and that's what she had said. And I'm like, you know what? That it just got the. I also got goosebumps. I get goosebumps when I know that I'm on the right path. And she said that to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's true. It makes sense. It totally just resonated with me. But still, I find myself sometimes not wanting to, maybe, I don't know what it is, not really wanting to recognize that full purpose. Or I don't know, maybe it's, I feel, sometimes I felt in the past, and sometimes I still have to think on this, I felt this imposter syndrome is really me. This is my purpose, that I'm doing this, helping others do this, even though I inherently know inside. And I know this, because even getting on your podcast, this resonates with me. I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing, but there's still that little voice in me of, no, no, you can't be doing this. I don't know if that makes sense. I know it wasn't the answer to your question. I didn't even respond to your question, but it just kind of made me think of that. But then to respond to your question, meeting these people that are sent past me to give me a word, or come to my book event, and it might be the first event that they've ever attended that have to do with this topic, and benefit from that. Those are the type of people that make me say, I'm doing this for you. I can right now, I'm thinking of various individuals, some that I don't really know, that they're the ones that have helped me continue to remember, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is my purpose. This is what I'm putting out. And it's because of, I can't name names, but because of one, two, three, four, those are the people that, all on this path, have been some of my greatest teachers, of helping me learn who I am. And I continue to learn that.
And you are the one that created the meaning for that. You alluded to something earlier
Mm-hmm.
that really amounts to free will. And
Mm-hmm.
what free will, exercise of free will comes down to is that we're really free to ignore all the messages.
Mm-hmm.
We're free to grab them, create meaning with them,
Mm-hmm.
and catapult our life and amplify our positive effect in the world so much. We're also free to ignore them. And sometimes the things inside us get in the way of us um, accepting that, hearing that, acting upon that. That still small voice in us that says, "This is what we're supposed to be doing. This is it. These are your people. You're here for them. You're here to help them." And free will allows us to completely ignore that based on our own subconscious drives. Because as a psychotherapist and as a coach, I recognize that the subconscious is about 95 to 99% of what goes on in our mental energy. Our conscious mind, the home of our our likes, our dislikes, our opinions, our choice of clothing, okay, how fast we drive, whatever. Um, that's literally like at best at any given time, maybe 5% of what's going on. The rest of it is the subconscious. And the subconscious is a really fascinating thing. Okay. It's a lot like this laptop that I'm recording this on today. It will just follow instructions. It will not have an opinion about it one way or the other. It'll just, if I tell it to actually, save like, 1 million files and download, 20,000 applications, it'll do that without an opinion about it. It'll just follow the instructions until it doesn't work anymore, until it doesn't even boot up, right? That's that's the bad news about the subconscious. The good news is it follows instructions. So if I tell my laptop or my subconscious to delete all of those files, delete all of those apps, defrag the hard drive, right? It will suddenly work the way its blueprint was meant to work. And so what happens is all those programs running in the background, we call them triggers, right? They're programs running in the background that we told our subconscious to go ahead and stuff that down and hang on to it, right? And then we're walking through life, our daily life, and when we step on a landmine we didn't even know was there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, as a psychotherapist, I joke with people all the time, like it gets to the point where there's so many triggers stuck in those repressed emotions in the subconscious that people just feel like they're running through a minefield that they can't see the mines every day. They're running blindly through that, and then they end up in my office or in my coaching program, and they're like, "Hey, I have anxiety, I have depression, I have overwhelm. I can't function in life anymore. I can't actually like make my marriage work or whatever it is because all those things are in there and those programs are running constantly." It wasn't until I actually figured out how to access the subconscious directly with a technique and then let it bring up all those things that are stuffed in there and then release them one at a time that my own purpose became clear in life. I always knew I was destined to be the healer in the room, but I didn't realize that we had to go into an area that was beyond just talking.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize we had to go into an area that was so deep that it literally was our body. And that these little negative energies that we have stored in here are getting in the way and they're getting triggered all the time. I was working with a guy one time. I also run an addiction program. He'd been in my addiction program about 8.5 years by this point, struggled with anxiety and panic attacks. And the anxiety disorder actually developed because he didn't know when he was going to have the panic attacks. So we used this technique. We traced it back to when he was 16 years old. He's 42 years old now. 16 years old. And this technique brought up the emotion of panic. I was like, "Hey, what's going on when you're 16 years old?" He's like, "Oh, come to think of it, that was when my mom's mom got really, really sick, like deathly ill all of a sudden." And I said, well, what were their responses to that? He said, my grandmother's response and my mother's response was pure and utter panic for like a year. And here's this sensitive 16-year-old empathic kid who's just being bombarded by this for a year. And what ended up happening? He internalized it, it got stuck inside him, and he developed a panic disorder and then a generalized anxiety disorder. And after working with this guy for 8.5 years, we released that emotion. We got to the healthy part of the relationship with that emotion. We released it after its messages. And since that time, a year and a half, this guy has not had a single panic attack. And because of that, his generalized anxiety disorder went away. It's the things that we store, it's the files that we store and the programs that are constantly running. These are what we traditionally call triggers. They're associated with these hurts, they're associated with these repressed emotions. When we can get rid of, this is why I love doing what I do. This podcast is one extension of what I do as a psychotherapist, as a coach to business people who want to take everything to the next level. Like, look, you've got to, like, you do the deep inner work, you identify these things and you release these things, and then your upper limits dissolve and you can amplify the good that you do in the world.
And actually, what you just said with the panic attacks, I that totally resonates with me. I'll give you a personal experience. Health is related to releasing trauma.
Mhm.
And I used to suffer from migraines, years of migraines, and 16 migraines a month. I would wake
Ooh.
up. Yes. Oh, yes. It was awful. Wake up with a migraine, wake up from a migraine, go to sleep with a migraine. I'd have them for 2, 3, 4 days. When I came back to the United States, I was with 16 migraines a month. Sometimes it was 18. I would keep track. I had a calendar. I eliminated from diets. I tried so many different medicines. At that point in time, I was going into the hospital just to be, I think it's called a migraine cocktail, just to try to uninflame my head. My eyes would shut halfway. They would be red, puffy, my whole face. You could see the veins just, boom, 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 out. I had other things going on as well. And as I started healing and as I started to work on, taking care of myself, both physically and getting enough sleep, water, all these different things, I started to be able to think a bit better. And I said, you know what? I think these medications, one, are doing worse for me. I think my body's out of balance. Let's go one by one. And in the end, I ended up having only two things. And one of them was the migraine. That was the biggest thing. But I knew I needed to get rid of these smaller things first. So I started seeing that, oh, I don't have the thyroid problem that the doctor said I did. I've been taking thyroid medicine for 2.5 years, and I don't have a thyroid problem today. I don't have a circulation problem that I also supposedly had. My body was so out of balance with everything going on, especially coming back into the United States and having to, reface all these old places with new eyes and trauma and things like that. Excuse me. So I published this book in May. It was May 18th. That was not even a year ago. My 16 to 18 migraines a month have went down to regular headaches. It was maybe 4 or 5 migraines, from 16 to 18 to 4 or 5. The last 2 or 3 months, I might get 2 migraines, and other headaches I get are because I didn't sleep well or I didn't really eat well. Why? Because I'm busy doing all these other things that sometimes I just forget to take some water and say, keep hydrated. But it's not the migraine that I had before. So I went from 18 migraines to 2 migraines in less than a year, from, in my opinion, like what you said, releasing this trauma. And I didn't even realize, after I published and I started to markedly notice I was not getting migraines like I was before. I was talking to someone and they said, well, how long have you had these migraines? Oh my goodness. I said, as long as I can remember. And then I said, well, no, wait, that's not true. Did I get them growing up? No, I didn't have them when I was 10. I didn't have them when I was 12. Did I have them when I was in my undergraduate? I thought to myself, not really in the beginning. No. Let's see. Oh, wait a second. I was assaulted when I was in my 20s. Bam! I thought to myself, something just clicked to me. And I've been getting all these migraines that have just built and built and built over a period of these, 20 years to get to me to the point where I didn't know if I'd be able to work again a full-time job. That was how bad my migraines were. Just I wasn't going out. I couldn't do a lot because I would tell my friends can't go because what if I get a migraine? It started to, kind of control my life. And now I'm a different person. And maybe like your client as well. It just changes your life when you start to really, like you said, go deep into some of these things and really release. I learned about I don't know a lot about it, and I'm not a professional, the polyvagal nerve,
Hmm.
and Dr. Stephen Porges, and that was I went to a trauma and attachment conference in Virginia last year, and it was just amazing. I Some of the things he was saying, it was about the polyvagal nerve and theory. It just also resonated with me, and I said, maybe that's also kind of what was happening to me when I had those migraines and when I released the trauma. So there was all these, everything. So it just opens up into something new and something new, and then I keep kind of putting two and two together. And so what you said also completely resonates.
You said to me in our written communications that your health improved almost 100% since following this path.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. So I actually completed a couple 5Ks. I had this out,
Ooh.
it'll be a quick story. And health wise, I decided that I wanted to run 5Ks. I have a friend, he might be listening as well today. His name is Kevin, and he's a retired military. He runs marathons, and I thought to myself, that's really inspiring. He runs marathons, and he dedicates those to slavery, and he'll stop every mile and he'll like say names of, former slaves or talk about slavery and things like that. And I'm like, oh, I want to do that as well for survivors. I'm going to run a marathon. I said to my friend Paul, I'm going to run a marathon. He's like, you're not going to run a marathon. Do you know how long that is? I don't know, 15 miles. Look it up. So I look it up and it's like 25 miles. And I was like, oh, wow. I'm not going to run a marathon right now, but someday let's start small. So I started running 5Ks, which I'm not a runner. I never imagined I could do anything like that. And I've since run 5Ks. I have a running mentor, Joe, that took me under his wing and, has helped me learn how to do this. And I've noticed that it's a new part of my healing, and it's a new part of my thriving actually, because I get out there and it's just me, and I am breathing, I'm getting oxygenated, and I just it's my body feels different. And I think I would add to that with the healing, that when I gave my book launch speech, I listened to myself afterwards on the interview. I didn't recognize my voice, and I didn't say that to anybody. And I had 3 or 4 people that know me well, one of them being my husband, who English is not his first language. And he says to me, that didn't even sound like you. And I didn't understand everything you said, but that didn't even sound like you. And other people said the same thing. I didn't recognize your voice. And I think, like now, as I'm thinking about it a little bit more, that book launch where we healed in community. My mother was there, my godfather was there, relatives, people that wouldn't have known this, and people that I wouldn't just say, hey, this happened to me if it was another, point in time. We're all there. And I just felt there was so much healing, and things just kind of lifted, and from that moment to now, like there's no stopping. Like this is, talking about healing and even being able to say the word sexual assault, and those are things that we need to talk about. Those are the hard topics that I can't keep in anymore because I know what it's done to me. And I think just going through that, and my fate. I don't You didn't know me before, but when I moved back to the United States, I was thin, I was malnourished, I wasn't me. We dealt There was so much that was going on. We come back to the United States, I start to heal. Now I feel, that I'm thriving, and I think even my skin looks better. I've been able to put on weight and keep the weight on, which makes me feel better because now I have some extra weight that I didn't have, and I'm making different choices for food. I mean, there's just so many things. And I just feel like when I look in the mirror sometimes, I smile at myself. I didn't even want to look in mirrors for the last, 20 years of my life. I only had one mirror in the house before. It was in the bathroom that I never really used because I didn't want to look at myself. And now I can look at myself and say, hey there. I think it was just such a step for me, and my skin looks better. I mean, I can go on about that for, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be overly passionate, but it was just amazing for me to be able to say I didn't recognize my voice. I don't even recognize who's looking at me in the mirror, but it's me. And I've been having, I have to assimilate that this is me. It's almost like that's the me that was in there all the time. But she was so pushed down, that 20-year-old self, or I don't know.
That is such a beautiful share. Really, when we when we suffer from these hurts, these traumas, right? And we stuff them down, right? They don't just sit there. They cause mischief, right? They interfere with our health. They interfere with our well-being. They interfere with our relationships. They interfere with our reactions to things. They place upper limits on ourselves, on our life. Um, but when we move into healing and we get rid of some of those and we get closer to that original beautiful blueprint, that amazingly wonderful gift that we got for coming here, which was our blueprint, right? We move in the direction of authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And every cell in our body responds positively to that. It unleashes the love, which is the healing energy of the universe. And that movement towards authenticity is often associated with that path, with our path, with our purpose. And your story of your book launch and your subsequent healing since then, and you're talking about like how your skin looks better and you don't even recognize your voice. You like found a voice that was suppressed. This is the good stuff here, right? This is the stuff our listeners tune in to want to hear because so often we're full of self-doubt, hopelessness, fear, anxiety, worry, despair, guilt, right? All these things, shame, all these things that really serve to get us to drift off that center blueprint, right? Because this is where our power is. This is where our amazing being and our gifts and everything lie. Okay? So doing that work gets us closer back to that. Every bit of work that we do gets us a little closer back to that just amazing human that we were meant to be until the world and all the hurt and trauma, right? And all the crap and oppression and all the different things that we experience here in this life and when we internalize those, they clog us up. They clog up the work. So these little programs running in the background all the time. And authenticity is such a beautiful and rare gift that we get when we get it back. Our skin glows.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what I was thinking. This was a while back. I thought to myself, what is going to be my take if I go on an interview or, what should I wear and things like that. And I thought to myself, no, you know what? It's unapologetically Melissa. This is me. I don't, I was taking a course, great course. I took a course with women and entrepreneurs, and I received a certificate. It was recently. We were talking about how people perceive us, and maybe what we might need to wear, so somebody would take us more seriously and things like that as women. There, women. It was a conversation that came up, and I mean, I get it. I totally get it. And, and I identify I'm a woman. But I thought to myself, if I'm going to go out there into the world, it's going to be also on my terms because I've had that dictated to me, through media and everything, movies and things my whole life. What is a woman supposed to look like? How are we supposed to act? And, oh, I have to be nice and not say anything, and I didn't say anything for 20 years. And, here I am now not being able to stop. And that's a good thing, but if I wear peasant skirts, I'm going to go in a peasant skirt. If I'm going to be on an interview, I want to keep in line for me. If I don't want to do something that's going to make me uncomfortable to make someone else comfortable in the sense of, of what I've had to heal from. And so I actually went on my first interview where my full body and everything was going to be showing. And I wore this beautiful skirt to me. I was comfortable in it, long flowing skirt. I love it. And I had this nice type of, big comfy sweater because I wanted to feel comfortable. And, it was a great, great podcast, Creative's Corner. It got onto the radio, and the host, he was very caring. It was actually my first podcast with a male at the time, and that was something I had to get over. This wasn't that long ago, and going into it, I was a bit nervous, and so that's why I guess that must be why unapologetically Melissa came up into my mind, because I wanted to be who I was. I wanted to show that. Maybe that's the authenticity piece that you're talking about.
It really is, because we ultimately can't be anything but that.
Right.
And the natural result of not being that is anxiety, depression, overwhelm, stress, disease, suffering.
Right. Right.
Because we are meant to be beautifully what we were meant to be. And when I really appreciate you sharing all that, because people need to hear this, right? People need to hear that they can give themselves permission to find their authentic self, to actually dive deep and do the inner work and actually heal. As a psychotherapist, the limitation of my profession typically is that therapy will give you a really detailed insight into why you make poor decisions or you respond this way, or all this like really deep and detailed insight into your hurts and your traumas. But what's the solution here, right? I cannot tell you how many clients have come to me throughout the years who had previous experiences with other therapists. And so I ask them, right? They're only trying therapy again because, they still have that hurt, they still have that trauma. And I ask them, when you saw your therapist before and you touched those big things in therapy, when you processed your trauma or you did things like, how many times did you sit out in your car and cry afterwards? And almost universally, they'll say, I totally did that. I did that after almost every single session until I just stopped going. And I was like, we're not going to do that here. We can't do that. That my whole goal here is not to re-traumatize you. My goal is to give you everything you need to actually heal and get back to that wholeness. And they're like, oh, thank goodness. Because that's what we need as humans. We can describe our hurts, we can describe our traumas endlessly. In fact, that's the narrative that you were talking about earlier. That's the narrative that has to be addressed, because it's that narrative that becomes toxic in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can't get past that narrative, if we can't take that pen back that we gave the world in writing our narrative and say, I'm writing this now. When we do that, we empower ourselves. How do we do that? We do the inner work. We do the healing. It's not enough just to describe it. The world will do that endlessly for you. You take that pen back and write that narrative yourself. And it sounds like that's literally what you did with your book.
Yeah, I think so. And just to add to that, so as I said before, I'm a circular thinker, and everything for me, I see the interconnectedness with so many things. And 20 years ago, I was writing about my hurt, my healing, my hope. In the beginning, it was it was my journal. The crisis counselor encouraged me to journal, so I started to journal, and I wrote lots and lots of hurt. And then there's a few that, as time went on, there's some, healing, there's some hope, and things like that. And when I published what I was thinking, when I was going through the stage of how am I going to publish this, and I thought, well, I want people to be able to read it. But what if they don't want to read it, out loud? Maybe they're not ready for that. Okay, yeah. So let me give them the instructions. You can either read it to them, like what you said, you can read it to yourself, you can read it out loud. It could be performed. So there's an active part. And I wanted to bring social justice into that because I've always been very passionate about social justice type of issues as well. And then I started thinking, well, okay, I want there to be a component where people can reflect and answer some questions at the end. So there's reflection questions. What if they need more resources? And I want to be inclusive and provide all these resources where they can go for other information on websites. So somebody that is LGBTQ community or somebody that is a male survivor, things like that, I left resources in the book. And then the personalization part is journaling for me has been a great tool for my own healing to help me dive deeper because it's me and my journal, which is actually myself. And I want to give other people that option of journaling after they read or listen to, my book or my performance piece. And then they can think, where would I fit in? Where would this piece fit in Melissa's act one hurt, or where could this fit into Melissa's act one hope? Or maybe the person starts thinking, well, let me do my own monologue of hurt, my own of healing, and my own of hope, and let me write about that a little bit more. And so that's what I wanted it to be active, where people aren't just reading passive and not just reading and then feeling afterwards, oh, I feel so bad, oh, Melissa got through her, she went into healing, now she went into hope, and maybe also give them that little nugget of they can do it too. And the actual cover of the book is my own handwriting of the words hurt, healing, and hope. And my husband did the illustrations because some people are visual and instead of maybe reading, and we all learn in different ways. And my husband did the illustrations for each act. And that was also really significant because somebody can look at just those illustrations and they can say, I see how this hurt, but I also see that what comes next is healing and hope. So it's giving another message in and of itself of somebody looking at that and being able to reflect on that and take that in. And maybe it can pick up on something else going on in them that then they can begin healing from as well. So I did it like that, I guess, for a reason. And I also started thinking, I formed the imprint, which was Write, Heal, Thrive, thinking, well, how did I get through some of what I got through? Because I didn't really go to a lot of counseling or a lot of therapy. I did some EMDR, and I did go to, in initial stages, I did go to therapy. And, then it was disassociation for many years. But I got through by writing, and by writing I was able to heal and thrive. So it's kind of become my own method, just me personally, of some of the ways that I have been able to heal and not re-traumatize me or not re-victimize me is going through this. Let's dive deep again and let's journal about it, let's kind of work it out, and me go back and forth with myself in that, as I start coming to my own reflections, conclusions, next steps, that's just how my thought process works.
That's fantastic because, and I think what you said there, I had just one more thing to it. You said, I want to, I want to heal, but I don't want to re-traumatize. Okay. And too often what happens is that in that journaling process, if it's not, if a therapist just says, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to go home and I want you to journal about this, right? Well, that person doesn't have any experience with that, right? And so what actually starts happening is, yeah, they've got the pen in their hand, but they've actually given the pen away. And all they're doing is writing out that narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And that narrative is is victimized in many cases. And so the re-traumatization just comes right back up, just floods right back up. In fact, writing that down can be, for some people, right? Um, it without proper guidance. Like your book is guidance in this, right? Without proper guidance, it's really just writing down the narrative.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I definitely agree. Even when you talk to people about it, well-meaning friends and supporters, sometimes, I've noticed that sometimes it's really difficult to be a supporter, and you also have to know, what to ask or how to ask. I think that was part of my training as a crisis advocate as well, and because you don't want to re-traumatize someone, by certain things, and you want to listen, without judgment and things like that. So I think for me as well, in addition to the book, for example, and performance piece being for a survivor who wants to find healing, I think it's also a way that supporters can understand a little bit more about what that person that they care about in their life might be going through, and to be able to support them better and reflect better on, on that as well, for the same reason, so they can be, the best type of supporter that they can.
Yeah, and so the healing truly is, it does take a community of people. It doesn't happen in isolation.
Yeah.
And my work with addiction clients over the years has shown me one thing absolutely universally true across the board, right? And that is addiction is a disease of isolation and loneliness. And if it doesn't start out that way, it ends that way, because your world just becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until you don't have anybody around you, and then healing becomes very difficult. And when we get people into our program, it's a medication replacement therapy. When we get people into our program, we tell them like, okay, like yeah, just kind of having, you used to use this and now you're using this, and that's great because that's not as harmful, and but you're really going to want to start working on this stuff. You're really going to want to figure out how this happened. And the people who thrive in the program, like the client that I spoke of earlier, are the people who embrace the therapeutic part of it, who really embrace the healing of it. Like, I don't want to just stop using drugs. And that client of mine back in the day, even before we had that experience with his panic and eliminating his panic disorder, he had gone on television and said and told a bit of his story, and then looked in the camera and said, but it's really been about the therapy. There's no way around that. It's having someone in your corner. That's the important thing. And so healing doesn't happen in isolation. And
Right.
so addressing those supporters in life, like you do in your work, the people who are in that person's ecosystem, right? And as a therapist, I can say sometimes, in a recovery therapist, sometimes it's about making sure that you don't spend a lot of time with the people in your ecosystem.
Right.
But you need to be able to find those people. And I'll tell you this, when people are healing and people are living their purpose and they're out there and they're putting themselves out there are always people, always, who are in the background, who are watching, hoping that you make it, because that gives them permission to go through the same process, and maybe they can make it too. That's what
Yes.
this podcast is all about, is
Mm-hmm.
bringing people like you on to share your story and your work so that people can be inspired to find that in their own life, turn their tragedy into triumph, and live their life's work. That's the beauty of what we're doing here.
No, no, I definitely agree. And I think also the supporters I've, I know have encouraged me to do this. So I think if it wasn't for them either, that I might not have been as, I don't know if I want to say comfortable with going forward with this, because it was not comfortable in the beginning. But in the sense of, I don't think I don't, perhaps it would have taken me longer, or perhaps I would have stifled it if my life telling me no. So like putting, ecosystem that you mentioned, just having, those people, and just, my family, my sister, my brother, my husband, my son, being supportive, that sometimes maybe certain relatives or family or friends didn't understand what I was going to do, or why I was doing this, because I've heard that, this is what you're doing, like, you're talking about what on camera, that you're publishing on what, or you get the deadpan type of looks of, oh, your daughter wrote a book on that, oh, right, okay, but in the sense, you know having these people that are supporting me to say, you're doing something good, you definitely need to do this. A friend of mine who, was the first person I ever told, has still been a friend all these years, and encourages me to keep doing this, this work. May I would even venture to say that people like him knew that this was my purpose long before I was able to even understand that or heal from it, and things like that. So I think that those are just some things that came into mind. I do want the other thing that you just said about giving people permission and things like that, and that gave me goosebumps and a little bit of tears. At my book launch, I had somebody that I didn't know, came up to me, and it was very difficult for that person to have been there. I didn't realize it. They were waiting patiently in line. They had a book. I signed the book, and I knew that this person wanted to say something and speak. So it turns out, in the end, that they read the press release, that I had this great guy that really helped me with the press release, publicist here in the town that I live in, just because he knew it was something good. So he helped me write the press release. He helped me get it into the press, and somebody came to this, launch, and they really wanted to speak to me. I can tell that there was really something important. And it turned out that this was the first event that they were able to come to that talked about that topic. That the feeling they got from the press release was that it might be okay. I might understand them. And they came, sorry, not, no, sorry, I'm sorry, not sorry for crying.
Not sorry at all.
No, they came to the event, and they were able to actually stay during the presentation. And I spoke. My sister actually my sister's an actress, and she vocalized a few of the choice monologues for people. And the crisis center was there. I had a healing shop in addition to the book of items made by survivors, to sell and support them. And this person was able to stay up until the book signing, which was literally most of the event. And they shared a few things about what that meant to them, what had happened to them. And I said, can I give you a hug? And you could tell that it took them a few moments to say, should I say yes or no, is that okay, and things like that. So it wasn't a full hug, but we did a light hug. And when that person left, they said, okay, I have to go now. I said, okay. And they left, and I thought to myself, that was the one. At that, like that was somebody that came, and maybe I don't know what they're doing now, and if they're out there, and I hope they know that it's them, but that person inspired me to keep going after that book launch. So I'm thinking the name right now, because I did ask what their first name was, and I just really hope they are finding healing. And I hope that anyone listening to this also can know that, through what you do and what I'm trying to do in the world, and that they can find their own healing as well, because they have it. I know they have it.
They have it within them.
Yes.
They just need to take that pen back and start rewriting their own narrative. And it's a beautiful thing. And again, I thank you for sharing that with me, with the audience too, because it's those people who are watching that we don't know about.
Right. And I don't know who else might be watching, and we don't know who's watching this podcast, but they're out, someone's out there, and we're here, and we have no idea. Even if you're listening to this, you have no idea whose lives that you're touching, but no doubt that you are. And you are, Adam, as well, just having this and bringing on people like me. It's an amazing thing. I never realized that I could be thriving until actually probably this past April, just a year ago. And I didn't think that I can have joy until actually like a month and a half ago. And literally a month and a half ago, it was, I had the thought after I had talked to somebody on a podcast, great guy. And after the podcast, something opened in me, and I thought, I'm finding joy. I never didn't know what it actually really felt like until literally a couple of weeks ago. And that's actually why I knew it was the right thing for me to do, to help co-author a book on the keys of joyful living. That's actually what made me make this decision, because I had been meditating on it for a couple of weeks of, can I do this? Should I do this? Is this the right time? Like, is this where am I going into this? I don't know. And then I had that moment where I said, finding joy as pertaining to me. And I said, oh my gosh, I am finding joy. Wow. Yes, I'm going to collaborate on this book. And it all happened when 2 weeks. And now I'm collaborating on this book of the keys to joyful living. It's been an amazing journey, and it's stretching me to somewhere where I don't know, but I'm okay with that. 20 years ago, I wasn't okay with any little thing that might have changed. But now it's like, okay, bring it on. I know it's okay.
That is so fantastic to hear. I love hearing stories of healing, and you are just about bursting onto the world, and
Yeah.
you're really coming into your own. And there's that authenticity again, right? And we're coming to the end of the podcast here, and I just want to say that I have really enjoyed having you on. I've really enjoyed listening to your newfound passion, right? Your new voice. I didn't know the other voice, but I love this voice.
Me too.
And I just want to really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for coming on and sharing with me and sharing with our audience. And my hope for them, of course, is that that they find permission themselves.
Thank you so much, Adam. I'm honored to be here today. Really am. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for listening to our show today. You can, of course, learn more about our guest by following the links below in the description. As always, I want to remind you to search your heart, do the important inner work, and give yourself permission to find your life's purpose and live your life's work. Thank you again for listening today.